Thank you. I'm exceptionally excited about this particular workshop because I'll be honest, like at the very beginning, I thought, I don't know anything about compassion-based resilience and I'm not sure what's going to happen. So, but then within about 30 seconds of talking to Ajay for the first time, maybe not the first time, I think we may have known each other when I was much smaller, but first time in recent memory, there was a sense of just something about just being deeply understood for something that for me feels like a very personal truth, which is that I am an introverted person trying to live in a very outgoing, extroverted kind of world. And there was something about how we spoke that was so nourishing. And I just knew within about 45 seconds of that we were in very safe hands and in for something super meaningful. And then over the last few weeks, I've been getting to know these different shades and layers of Ajay. And Ajay I don't even know which end to pick. So I'll just start from the one that is the most relevant. I mean, he's certified to lead compassion-based resilience training meditations, which of course he'll say more about. I think he's, okay, I wrote this down because this one falls out of my head a lot. But he's the director, the HR director for Asia Pacific for Colgate Palmolive. And in addition to this, he's a poet whose work, as I have learned in the last 5 minutes, has been translated into Slovakian as of this morning, and German, Hungarian, Polish, Greek, Vietnamese, and Hindi. And this is just a little, I mean, it's just incredibly motivating for me, at least, to know that it's possible to have these sweet, tender, vulnerable, authentic spaces inside of us while making it in the so-called real world. I mean, it's all real, of course. So just naming all that, and I'd like to share just 5 sentences, 5 lines that I discovered today on the internet, which are part of his poetry, which is available online. And it's not available online, but it's available for purchase and it's been published. But this is what we found, and I think this might be a meaningful way to begin, is this. I slow down these mysteries surrounding me this day, bits and pieces of wonder stuck here in these crevices, these woods, these last outposts of where I belong. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ajay. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for being here.
No, thank you genuinely, Mansi. I think it's a great pleasure, and I always see sessions like these with a group of people, all of whom are trying in some ways to become better humans, as the most nourishing thing I do. And I return to this particular act again and again because I'm quite convinced, as you will see over the next about 2 hours or so, why I feel so much of conviction in this particular method. And like many people with a scientific temperament or someone who came through a behavioral science background, for many years, I've been deeply skeptical of the ability of each of us to change for the better. For a long time in psychology, the doctrine was that our brains are hardwired, and that once we reach a certain age, it is set in its way at a very physical level, at a neuronal level. And it's difficult to change it, was what we were taught. And I'm talking of this in mid-90s when I was doing my master's. And then I moved into management, a profession that, of course, every once in a while was very concerned about how people work, but in a very limited way. And I've kept, and I'm pretty sure some of you here might be in management, and hopefully you would relate and agree with me to some extent that it doesn't sometimes go into the full depth that one would want about understanding human beings. But I stayed close to the discipline of psychology and became a member of the American Psychological Association. Tried adopting psychology in my profession. And like Manasi mentioned, I also had this itch for writing, which has been there for very long. I couldn't help it. It was an urge if I didn't write somehow. And I have colleagues who ask me, why do you write poetry? You don't make money. And I tell them it's one of those things. I just have to do it. It's an urge. And accidentally, I stumbled on some research article in a journal of neuroscience, which spoke about how certain kinds of meditations, which trace its origin to 3rd, 4th century BC in India, in the Buddhist tradition primarily, how those were getting converted into therapies. And I believe in that particular article, it has been many years back, the University of Oxford started a mindfulness center, and they actually found the efficacy rate of treating major depression through these therapies was very promising. And I said, this is interesting. Let me dig a little deeper. And then I finally decided to go for this compassion-based resilience training, which essentially is a method which started in 1998 in the University Hospital of Cornell in New York City, and then immediately was adopted in the University Hospital of Columbia. And in these two university hospitals, this method flourished as a way of treating people who are suffering from pain or from trauma or depression. And then from there, it spread to quite a few other clinical settings. And CBRT is not the only method which is meditation inspired. There are many sister therapies. There is MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction. There is mindfulness based cognitive therapy. To cut a long story short, from being therapies that were on the fringe of mental health care, these therapies have now gone mainstream in all the big medical colleges. More importantly, apart from mental health, we are now figuring out and finding out the potential of these therapies to make each of us a little less anxious and little less calm. I mean, little more calm, okay? So how I'm going to do the session, it is unstructured. The CBRT instructor course was a 1-year course which I did with Dr. Joe Loidzo himself, who is a founder of CBRT. I was a member of a cohort. We got trained. I think it was a 1 year of my life, which I think was truly transformative personally, but also was a rigorous training which partially made us very aware of the neuroscientific evidence and partially taught us how to teach the meditation itself. So in today's session, I will start by doing a very brief meditation from the Samatha tradition. CBRT has 8 modules, which are 8 meditations, 8 different kinds of meditation. It goes from the basic mindfulness in the Samatha tradition to the second stage of mindfulness in module 2, to a third stage of mindfulness with some insight or wisdom meditation from a bit of the Vipassana tradition. And then it moves into traditions which use compassion as a primary vehicle for meditation, going into certain Tibetan methods after that in module 6 and 7, which are around imagery and visualization. And it also incorporates breath work at an advanced stage. The full course typically takes 16 sessions, or some instructors use it as an 8-session course spread over many weeks. But today is supposed to be like a taster menu. So we won't be going into the full thing. I will just try and expose you to a little bit of what CBRT means. The session is interactive, and we do have time built in for discussion, a question and answer. Apart from the meditation, all I will do is give you some sense of what neuroscience has discovered. What we think is happening to our brain as we meditate, and as we meditate over many different days and months and make it into a habit. Okay. The one request I would have is when I do the guided meditation part, uh, it would be fantastic if you are comfortable to turn on the video, only because it helps me, look at your facial muscles, your shoulder, the way you breathe, and according to the energy of the group, what I typically do is modulate the instructions a little bit. Okay, so that is the only request I have. Otherwise, everything is cool. It's an informal session. So if everyone is ready, shall we get into the first meditation? Fantastic. I can see all of you have turned on the video. Thank you for that. So CBRT is a secular tradition, so it doesn't have any affiliation to any spiritual or religious school per se. It is, like I said, adapted into a clinical setting. So I'm sure many of you might have been exposed to various kinds of meditation over the year, but CBRT doesn't require you, for instance, to sit cross-legged on the floor. What we find through the research in clinical setting is, as long as your spine is straight and erect, whether you sit cross-legged or you sit on a chair, doesn't really make a huge difference from a brain science perspective. Okay. And I qualified by saying I'm not an authority on spiritual matters or religious matters. My skills are only with CBRT. So with that, let's go to the meditation. And if you are new to meditation, it's possible you may find something strange sometimes happening in your body. And my only guidance would be, take it easy, nothing to worry. There is nothing which is strange or abnormal. Whatever happens to the body, just enjoy it. And it's like a ride. Okay. So first thing, if I can just request you to open your palm like this and hold it up and just gently put it on your knee, your left palm on your left knee, your right palm on your right knee. Just gently. This is to prevent your hands from moving around while we meditate. You don't need to clutch the knee too hard, just gently. Take a couple of deep breaths. Clear your lungs. Gently close your eyes. If closing your eyes shut make you very uncomfortable, you can leave it slightly open and focus on your nose tip. Just gently drop your shoulder. Sit relaxed and comfortable. Just pay attention to the breath that is coming in through your nostrils. As you pay attention to the breath, you will see that your breath goes down slowly from your nose into your throat, into your chest, down into your belly, and then it may come back again, rising up from your belly into your chest, your throat, your nostril. If you get any distracting thought or sensation, just ignore the distraction and go back to your breath Imagine your breath is like a train or a car that is traveling in your body. Just ride on that car of your breath. Go down with it and then come up with it. Go down again and come up. And as you focus on your breath, you will notice that between your in breath and your out breath, there is a small pause when you are neither breathing in nor breathing out. Just pay attention to that pause. Enjoy the slowness of your breath, the slowness of your body. As your breath goes down and then moves up. And every time you sense a distraction, gently ignore the distraction and go back to your breath. And as you stay with your breath, as you become one with your breath, you will notice that your body has slowed down considerably. You are feeling more gentle, more calm. You're finding a balanced energy, neither too agitated nor too sleepy. Just that middle zone of pleasant, balanced energy. Enjoy being in the zone of balanced energy. And as you stay close to your breath, accepting everything about your breath or any distraction that may be occurring to you, accepting your body, you feel at peace, you feel grounded, quietly happy, strong, yet light and free. And thus feeling calm and confident and comfortable under your skin, you are now ready to turn your attention to every part of your body. Notice how the breath has entered every cell in your body, every tissue, every bone, every muscle, and thus imbued with the gentleness and the slowness of your breath, you are feeling all the stress and strain in your body is slowly melting away. All the tension from the top of your head to the bottom of your toe is melting away like butter melting away in a frying pan. Notice how the tension on the top of your head is slowly melting away. The tension on your forehead, your eyebrows, the tension on top of your eyelids, your nose, your facial muscles, your jaw, and the tension inside your mouth is slowly melting away. The tension on the back of your head, the tension behind your ears, on your neck, your right shoulder, your left shoulder, and your throat is melting away. The tension on your upper back, your spine, your lower back, your chest, your lungs, your rib cage, your heart, your liver, your intestines, your stomach, your kidneys, your abdomen. All that tension is being washed away gently, pushed away by the balanced energy of your breath. The tension in your pelvic muscles, your hip, your upper thigh, your knee, your ankle, your calf muscle, your right foot and your left foot, your right toes and your left toes, the tension below your feet, all of that is slowly melting away. Your entire body, from the top of your head down to your toes, has slowly been freed of all tension, and you're feeling free and strong and secure and light and quietly happy and gentle and grounded, feeling connected with the sky and with the earth below. Your entire body has become a living, breathing bubble that is free, that is solid, that is light. Just enjoy this serenity. Be with your breath for some time, neither too agitated nor sleepy, just a balanced energy as you, your breath, your body accept everything about your breath and your body and your mind, even a distracting thought or a sensation or an itch is welcome. They're all part of who you are. Slow down, savor the slowness of your breath, being calm, being serene, being joyful. Just stay with your breath. Enjoy the rhythm, the slow rhythm of your breath. And now that you're fully immersed in your breath, now that your breath and your body are one, and you're feeling secure and calm and centered, and now that you have enjoyed the beauty and the strength and the slowness of your breath, you are feeling comfortable to slowly come back into the real world, cleansed of all stress, cleansed of all negative energy, feeling pure and light and free. You can turn your attention to the sound outside your body, to the temperature in your room touching your skin, to the sound of your instructor. And whenever you feel ready, you can slowly open your eyes and come back into the real world. You can open your eyes and come back into the real world. Welcome back to the real world. Okay, I'm just curious to hear how you felt about this meditation, but even before that, how long did you think this meditation was? How long did it feel for each of you? You can either type into the chat or unmute and speak. Either way is okay. Felt like about 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 to 20. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay. So we have a range of responses, which is very typical. Usually you will have many people reporting it is shorter than it actually was, and a few reporting it was much longer than it actually was. So it was between 15 to 20 minutes. It was roughly that was how long the meditation was. Okay. If any of you want to share, it would be wonderful if you can report back and tell us how you felt. It can be a feeling, but also if you can share anything you felt in your body, that would be very nice for the rest of us to hear, which you experienced during the meditation. Again, you're free to unmute and speak, or you can put it in the chat. Yes, Bijuet.
One point, I thought I may go to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, regarding the posture, at some point I felt like My shoulder and upper body was slumping.
Mm-hmm.
There again, I brought back attention back to that.
Mm-hmm. And how did you feel overall at the end of the meditation or during the meditation? What emotions went through, if any?
See, at some point of time, I think I was not hearing you as well. I'm sure I didn't sleep.
You didn't.
Yeah, and overall, the sense is sense of relaxation.
Sense of relaxation. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Joyce says, I was in my own world, a feeling of relaxation with no stress. Very happy to hear that. That's wonderful to hear.
I
Joyce,
see
anything? Yes,
Bhuti has
Raj.
raised his hand.
Okay. So maybe
Yeah,
Moti next. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, what Mr. Krishnan said, I was also almost. I had a sense that I almost maybe may have drifted away for a couple of minutes here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I come back feeling a lot calmer.
Not
Definitely,
calm.
even my I can sense that my voice has also slowed down. I speak much faster than this.
That's wonderful to hear. And what do I call you as? I'm sorry.
I'm Bodhi. Bodhi is
Bodhi.
good.
Yes. Okay. Bodhi is fine. Okay. Thank you, Bodhi. Um, Raj says a lightness of arms, almost as if they were floating, and sensation of breath entering tissues was there. I mean, wonderful to hear that. Um, these are all very typical responses I get with various groups, so nothing abnormal, I can assure you, with any of the responses.
We
Um,
have Mukul and Mansi's hand raised as well. So
okay,
Mukul, if you can share first.
Yeah, so I just felt, initially my heartbeat, it was, thumping very, very hard. And as the meditation progressed, I could feel that it is slowing down. And I could also feel that, my hands, like, uh, one time I could see that, my hands are not there, like, they are just floating. So yeah, it was when I went through from head to toe, um, the whole body felt. I could feel the sensation throughout my body. So yeah, it was a good feeling, and generally I'm I could not sit for this long. I've been noticing, but today I'm pleasantly surprised that I'm able to sit for so long in the cross-legged position. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mukul. Thank you for a very detailed description, a very observant description of what you underwent in your body. Thank you. Um, Vega says, like electricity in my body, felt tempted to scratch myself. Okay. Um, anything you want to share, Vega, in terms of how you felt at the end of it, of the whole meditation?
Actually very relaxed and sleepy.
Okay.
But I was actually scratching. I remember you said try to stay with palms, but I was scratching here and there.
Yes, I think I noticed you became still as we progressed towards the end. And at the beginning, I did. Did you feel anything on your shoulder?
Uh, more arms.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I could sense that there was probably some sensation. Okay, but glad to know it was relaxing overall.
And one more thing is we need to be sitting. Because lying down is so my spine can be straight.
Yeah, Yes, at one point I didn't see you in the screen. I didn't know what happened. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Shabari, lightness in the head and facial muscles relaxing, tension leaving my back. Okay, the metaphor of the bubble, sense of floating light and strong. Wonderful to hear. So I'm imagining all those sensations and experiences would have contributed to a sense of feeling calmer and less stress. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Shabari. Devika, yes, many distractions in the beginning. Okay, I didn't know what was happening, but I did sense that you were probably distracted. Wonderful that we have a dog also actually part of the session. I love dogs. Itch on the back, on the neck, and thoughts kept going elsewhere, which is again very common. Okay, and the guided process really helped, and at the end, the mind settled down and was quieter. So again, I assume, which means to some extent, the exercise contributed to making you a little calmer. Fantastic. Great. I don't know if I missed anybody.
Yeah. So
If
there are
anyone,
two hands
yes.
raised, Mansi and Lucy. If I can request Mansi, whose hand was raised first,
I was trying to
and then
lower
Lucy.
my hand. I thought I could type. I can say it quickly. I had a particular release somewhere here. And this happened in like bursts, like just a little something opening and then something more and something more. And it wasn't sleepy, but it was like the more I slowed down, the more my body said, okay, it's safe to rest. It's okay to rest, which I haven't felt in a while. So really quite releasing. My hands wanted to do a lot of moving around. So the knee, keeping them on the knee thing was very helpful. But this thing in the head was, I don't know, it was very interesting because it was just ripples kind of releasing. And eventually, something you said about the breath, like accepting the mind as is really helped. Because in my head, I'd landed up, my head kept sending this image of me on the beach and there's waves coming up, and I was just very peaceful. But somewhere when you said accepting that, then the waves became the breath. And that was so there was some integration and it was easy to stay. Very cool. Very, very cool.
And the back of the head, the sensation, do you still have it or has it completely gone?
It's there a little bit, but it's like it's just releasing. Like there's something tied up and it's just saying, oh, okay, now I can kind of let this go. Not much thinking
Think
around. Yeah.
opening and closing like an oyster, I guess.
Yeah,
Just
just like breathing on it's like it's its own entity and it's breathing on its own right now.
yeah,
That sounds
yeah.
creepy, but yeah.
Okay. And overall, what was the feeling it left you with? Is it calmness overall?
There's something like that sense of being safe in my own body. And it took, when you said that the molecules resisted it, my body seemed to resist it. And so I stayed with that. And then there was it's like they're testing out, is it really safe? So they're relaxing like slowly. It's like there's a conversation happening in my body at the moment. It's interesting. I feel a lot calmer for sure. Like, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Mansi.
Lucy. Are we audible?
I don't know if we lost Lucy.
Yeah.
No, I'm there.
Are you there? Okay.
Yeah, I was waiting for the order to speak.
Okay. Sorry. Please go ahead.
Yeah, for me, like the first speaker, I felt so relaxed until at one moment I felt like sleeping. At that moment, I could barely get what you were saying. Then all of a sudden, I heard you saying, okay, you should not drift into sleep. And then I just came back and it was quite relaxing, I could say. It was really quite relaxing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Um, and this is just a very simple, basic, foundational meditation, which we do in module 1 out of the 8 modules of CBRT. And what we have seen in laboratory based research, where meditators have been hooked up and their MRI scan and electrical activity and blood flow in the brain has been scanned, is that even a meditation like this, which is foundational for not just CBRT, but many other therapeutic approaches, including MBSR or MBCT, is that you would be very surprised to know even a 10-minute meditation like what we did, or even shorter than what we did, done repeatedly over a period of as few as 20 days or 30 days, begins to show structural changes in the brain. That's as few as you need. For some people, it may take a little longer, but usually the consensus is that habit formation, and this is a habit formation, by the way, there is nothing mysterious about it, nothing supernatural or magical about it. It is just formation of a new habit, can take anywhere between 21 to 56 or 60 days. And just to give you a sense now, a little bit before we get into a Q&A and doing one more meditation, is to tell you a little bit of what we think we know around why meditation seems to offer the promise, or a meditation such as what we do within CBRT gives a promise for giving relief to people. So for that, we have to understand the brain. So being a psychologist, typically the thing we try to understand is what happens at a very physical level in the brain. And there is a lot of neuroscience research. This whole subject has gone very mainstream in neuroscience, and many researchers are trying to find out what exactly happens. So let's talk a little bit of the brain, and we can go into as much of depth as you want, but I will start with a little bit of a primer. And to understand the brain, one must understand when the brain evolved and why it evolved. And the human brain, the structure of a human brain has not changed much since the beginning of our species. From the time our ancestors and forefathers roamed the grasslands of Africa before migrating to the rest of the world, as you know, Homo sapiens emerged out of Africa. Our brain has largely been the same. So how old does it make this organ in terms of history? Does anyone want to take a guess? Roughly. It has been unchanged for how long? No right or wrong answers.
10,000 years?
Yeah, so around 50,000 years probably is when it began. And some researchers say maybe as old as 1 lakh years that it has largely been intact. There is some hypothesis that maybe when the river civilizations began, our brain may have evolved a little bit and changed, in which case your answer is probably right, Sid. It could be 10,000 years when the early river civilizations began. But in any case, thousands of years. Okay, so for thousands of years, this organ has largely, inside a skull, has largely remained intact. But the world outside it has changed considerably. The world 10,000 years back is not the world that we have today. And that has profound implications on our happiness, which I'll explain in a moment. But before doing that, just one question for each of you. How many of you think that it is difficult to rewire your brain once you reach, let's say, 30 years or 35 years? Just curiosity. How many of you believe it's okay? Okay, it's difficult. Okay.
I believe it's
Yeah, that's
difficult, but might not be impossible.
impossible. Yes. Thank you, Bodhi. Yeah. Okay. So yes, and that's a notion which a lot of us do ingrain in ourselves, and it is not inaccurate. But I'll explain to you there are ways in which you can revive the brain, and this kind of meditation is one of them. But now coming back to the brain, why do you think the brain evolved in the first place as an organ? Not just in humans, by the way. Your dog which came and licked you, Devika, the dog has a brain. The snake has a brain. Birds have a brain. What is the main purpose of the brain? Any guesses?
Survival.
Yes.
I was going to say keep you safe.
Keep ourselves safe. Yes, survival. So in any animal, it's an organ to scan and detect any threat that might be there in the environment, avoid it. And in the case of our forefathers, maybe in the African grassland, you can imagine our forefathers standing with a spear made out of a stone tool, looking for a leopard, avoiding a leopard, hiding in a cave, avoiding a tribe which is hostile, and a lot of pathogens around with no vaccines. So trying to avoid anything which is contaminated. At the same time, looking for someone with whom the next generation can be procreated, finding a mate, finding food so that he doesn't starve. And life then was nasty, brutish, and very short. Most children didn't survive even into 5 or 6 years old. And you also had so many dangers that the average lifespan, we believe, even 10,000 or 20,000 years back, most people wouldn't see adulthood. Overwhelming majority of mankind would either die during childbirth or die when they are an infant or a toddler. And the lucky few who even enter childhood don't see teenage period, and very even fewer get into what is known as adulthood. So there are just so many danger. Now, what happens to an organ which tries to navigate and keep yourself safe in that sort of an environment? It's a hypothesis, but we can make some conjectures. Any guesses? What would happen to a brain which is constantly surrounded by threats, dangers, and other things which can make you insecure?
It gets tuned to responding to that kind of stimulus.
Yes, thank you, Levika. It becomes an organ which scans for dangers. It becomes a very alert organ which is on edge, looking for that leopard and looking for that hostile neighboring tribesman or a snake or whatever else might be in that dangerous environment. And this is, by the way, more than a hypothesis. We know this for a fact that our brain is conditioned to be much more of a danger and risk avoidance machine than a success seeking machine. Because look at it this way, one attack from a leopard or any other big cat, or one bite from a venomous snake could prove far more costly to the individual human and to a species than seeing an imaginary leopard. I can see an imaginary leopard 100 times, waste my energy, but I'm still living. And when I'm living, I still have a chance of sending my genes into the next generation by having children. But that one time I make a mistake and not see a real leopard can prove very, very expensive for me and for the species. And therefore, we are very designed to be super careful when it comes to failure. And this, I want to illustrate this with a very simple example. I was, before moving to Hong Kong last year, I was living in Mumbai. I was living on the 12th floor of an apartment in Powai. And there was a rope which was coiled that I had kept in the kitchen one day after unpacking a carton. And it was below the water jug I keep in the kitchen. And sometimes I have a habit in the middle of the night to just wake up, go and drink the water without switching on the light, and then coming back and continuing my sleep in the bed. So this particular time when I came to pick up the water jug, accidentally I kicked this coiled rope. And in a split second, even before I knew, my heart started beating faster and I made a slight jump backwards. Even before my cortex and my linguistic brain could tell me that it was a snake, my brain reacted to a potential danger of a snake, which was actually irrational. There is no way a snake can find itself onto the 12th floor an apartment in Mumbai. But the same reflex, many of these reflexes are still part of us. And this is exactly what happens to our brain. And today what we know is whenever we detect a small threat, there is a part of the brain called the amygdala, and specifically the right amygdala, which is somewhere here. It immediately triggers what is known as a stress response. Basically, it contacts the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, which in turn asks the adrenal gland in the kidney to emit cortisol and quite a few other chemicals, but cortisol, for the sake of explaining stress, is more important. And that prepares our body to either run away from whatever is threatening us or fighting it. So if you corner a cat, there are only two things it will do. It will either try to run away from you or it will try to fight you, or any animal. And we are the same at the end of the day. And this amygdala, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal gland activation, which we call simply as stress, when it is repeated again and again and triggered again and again, can become a habit. And I don't need to tell you, it has a lot of other consequences. Too much of this activation, repeated, frequent activation, if activation is because of something which has happened in the past, broadly put, that becomes depression. If the activation about is something which is unforeseen, but you anticipate in the future, that becomes an anxiety disorder. If the activation is about something about which you are very obsessed in extreme frequency, that converts into a pathology like OCD, and so on and so forth. So in a very, very simple way, you could conclude that a lot of the mental health issues or unhappiness we as individuals or we as species are confronted with today is because of a unnecessary, too frequent, exaggerated triggering of this stress response to dangers which are not of the same scale as a predator which our ancestor had to contend with. Now, this doesn't mean there isn't a time for it to be triggered. You might actually find yourself in a situation of crime, let's say, or a situation where you could be threatened physically, or your very existence is under threat. And at such a time, a stress response is perhaps appropriate because it strengthens your body by increasing heart rate, sending, pumping blood, retracting your digestive enzyme from the stomach, creating sweat on your palms so that your body cools down after a fight or running away. And all of that is very logical and rational. But look at our lives. That perhaps happens to us very rarely, unless you are in a very bad neighborhood, in a terribly bad city, or fighting a war. Most of our lives, you would agree, do not have the same life-threatening dangers but your brain doesn't know it. Rather, your amygdala doesn't know it. So the amygdala doesn't distinguish too much between a leopard and entering the office of your boss for a performance appraisal. It emits electricity either way. It doesn't distinguish between your leopard and a boss. And the same stress response happens. And again, when the stress response happens, every time you have an incident which makes you insecure, it causes wear and tear in your body, and ultimately it starts causing psychopathology. We know meditation, specifically the meditation we did. My tutor, Dr. Joe Loizo, and his associates published a landmark research article in a very reputed journal about a decade ago, which showed a few amazing things in people who are known as master meditators. And these are mostly people in the Tibetan tradition, people who have clocked 20,000, 30,000 hours of meditation in their lifetime. There are extraordinary evidence that in some cases their right amygdala actually has shrunk over the years they meditated. They've actually become smaller, which means physically the brain is less capable of stress response compared to you and me. They found a thickening of the prefrontal, orbital prefrontal cortex. Now, this particular part, it's somewhere here, is super important for self-regulation and emotional regulation. They also found thickening and increased electrical activity in the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, which is important for executive functions of the brain and for impulse control. Interestingly, we also find, so what this means is your ability to be aware of your own emotion and your own reaction increases with meditation while you meditate. Even more importantly, that particular effect then seems to spill over into your daily life, meaning your threshold for stress response activation is actually reducing as your brain is getting rewired and your amygdala is shrinking. There are other fantastic, now this doesn't mean you are killing your emotion. On the other hand, we are finding the centers in the brain which are, there is for empathy, there is a very important structure within the default mode network called mirror neurons. Mirror neuron activity also increases. So the parts of the brain which is involved in empathy also is going up. So you're actually, in a way, fostering your ability to empathize with another fellow human being who's suffering. There is a part of the brain called the right insula, and the right insula is very important for you to monitor what's going on in your body. So one of the troubles of our modern living is, unlike our ancestors, most of us have lost touch with what is happening in our body. The whole kinesthetic sensation, breathing and your bowel movements. And so the right insula is what allows your cortex to gain access to what's going on in your body. We see electrical activity in the right insula going up, and so on and so forth. There is another incredible evidence which shows why this works, which is if you open the skull, and those of you remember the brain from the laboratory that we would have had in school day, the brain is roughly like this. It's like a walnut. You have two hemispheres, and the two hemispheres are connected mainly by one cable or one nerve called the corpus callosum. The left hemisphere, again, what I'm saying is a bit of an oversimplification, but for the purpose of this conversation, I think it is pretty accurate. The left hemisphere is analytical. It tends to be optimistic. It is the hemisphere which does linguistic processing. And it is an abstract processor hemisphere for right-handers, most right-handers. The right hemisphere, again generalized for right-handers, tends to be the sensory motor, synthetic rather than analytical. It is the one which will synthesize everything. Tends to be more prone to worst case thinking, a bit of a pessimistic brain, but a synthetic brain. In most psychopathology, we will find usually there is quite a bit of right brain or parts of right hemisphere activity and very little left. In general, when we are happy or learning or calm, you will find both hemispheres light up with electrical activity. As you know, there are about 80 to 100 billion neurons in each of our adult brain. Divided between these two hemispheres or spinal column, and there are a few neurons in our gut, in our intestine also, but not too many. So you'll find when we are happy, when we are learning, both hemispheres light up generally, and within the four hemispheres, you have the four lobes. There is a frontal lobe, there is a temporal, parietal, and occipital. All the four show electrical activity. Master meditators, the nerve that connects the two hemispheres, which is how the two hemispheres talk to each other, the corpus callosum in master meditators sometimes tend to be twice as thick as an average person, which means that cable transmits far more electricity between the two, and those two hemispheres are talking to each other. There is an incredible experiment which was run in the University of Michigan by one of my distinguished co-faculty at the Nalanda Institute, David Richardson, and he and his laboratory studied the ability of master Tibetan meditators to switch on what is known as gamma frequency wave, which is a wave usually associated with activity in two parts of the brain, which is called the caudate and putamen. So when we learn a new language, for example, we see electrical activity in the caudate and putamen. And those two, when there is activity there, sometimes we find what is known as gamma synchrony or gamma waves operating. Gamma waves are usually more than 34 hertz. Most of us, when we are wakeful doing something, we operate in something called beta wave, which is between 14 to 34 or 14 to 28 is a hertz frequency of electricity inside our brain when that happens. And different parts of the brain can have different wave. But these master meditators in the University of Michigan, when they went into meditation, at will, with a few seconds notice, were able to switch on this gamma synchrony at will. It is almost like I say, all right, I am now going to be happy, I'm going to be playful, let me close my eyes, and within 5 seconds, voila, my brain actually is showing the markers or the electrical activity which is correlated with happiness. Okay, now these are remarkable preliminary evidence. And I want to be very careful in saying this preliminary evidence because there is still a lot more we need to research and validate before. And even now, meditation-based therapies don't work for everybody. There are limitations. No therapy, no drug-based medication, for example, can cure depression in everyone. We wish it were so, but unfortunately it is not. But it does work for some people in some conditions, and therefore it offers hope. So these are some preliminary evidence from science, and I just want to leave it with you. I am a skeptic. I'm somebody who for a very long time needed hard evidence before believing in everything. It doesn't help that I'm not religious in my orientation either. So I tend to take anything. And initially I had some bit of a resistance because I thought, okay, meditation equals religion. And then I started understanding it's a bit like yoga. It doesn't have to be attached to any particular faith. Okay, so I wanted to share this. Of course, what I've shared with you is just a sampling of what we know. There is far more, which I'm happy to share with those of you who may want to understand much more about the brain science behind this meditation. So I will stop there. I think we have plenty of time. We can discuss, have some questions, answers, whatever I can answer, I will do so. I do have access to some great experts, so whatever I cannot answer, I can always refer back to somebody who, and then I can circulate it back to all of you. Any questions? Or anything you want to discuss, also very welcome.
I'm wondering, yeah, I see Mukul's hand is raised. Sure, Mukul, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for quite a detailed analysis of the mind. I'm sorry, unfortunately, I lost you in the middle, but yeah, that's okay. Hmm. So my question, relates to not that 10,000 years, maybe, I just want to understand. So, how does the brain develops in, say, foundational years of a child? What are the important factors? What are the neurons which develop? There is an early childhood science which I am a little bit aware of, but yeah, I wanted to understand your perspective on how important is the early foundational years experiences of a child, say from 0 to say 3-4 years, um, and how does the child, or is there a study where it says that how does the child performs or behaves under stress situations later on in their life, when they are, say, 25, when the prefrontal cortex is developed, or maybe around 40 years, after 40 years. So yeah, so that was one burning question uh, I'm holding at this moment. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Mukul. I will start by firstly saying, so it's not an area that I have expertise or certification in, but I would share my perspective in terms of what I know. So first of all, there is no doubt that each of us in our adulthood is a product of a few things. The way our genes are, gene transcription contributes to who we are. The kind of genes we have, but also how it is interpreted and read in the course of a lifetime contributes to who we are when we are at 40 or 45, let's say. There is no doubt the every experience that you undergo early in your life does contribute, and it's very simple because the brain learns through association. Every stimuli that is it is subjected to, it has a response, and the link of the stimuli and response, if it is repeated sufficiently, gets baked into the physical structure of the brain. In a sense, it becomes a circuit, and therefore your orientation changes each time your circuitry changes. So when you're small, let's say if you suffer from trauma, your brain is baked in a fashion which is correlated with how people who undergo trauma uh, uh, experience, and that will then dictate how you respond to your stimuli coming after that and after that. So there is this tendency of a brain to perpetuate its own orientation, if that makes sense. So once the water flows, a river flows in a certain channel, it's difficult to change the course of the river, is a kind of a metaphor. Um, there is a lot of research that early childhood, I'm not an authority on how early it goes back to, but there is no doubt, and I'm unfortunately going back again to trauma. There's no doubt that trauma, for instance, can stay with you incredibly long, well into adulthood. Um, but having said that, there are also some things we could do to rewire or minimize the depth of those channels already flowing in us. And any learning, any therapy, meditation based therapy is one way of doing it, can end up loosening and reconfiguring the predisposition that one has. There is also some bit of research. I don't know how far this is settled or how much the evidence is, can be termed by scientists as categorical. But the other day, my tutor did share some very interesting evidence of even gene transcription or interpretation in master meditators could get regulated to some extent. So you could actually inhibit or dampen the expression of some predisposition. So that's perhaps the most accurate answer I could give. Mukul, I don't know if that satisfies what you asked for. I think I would summarize it as, yes, we are all a product of what goes before us, but there seems to be some ability and some freedom we have within those constraints to shape who we become and who we are continually evolving to, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's how I would put it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think,
Well,
yeah, insightful. Insightful. Is that, although the rewiring is difficult, but yeah, possible. So,
possible. Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to read some inspiring true accounts, there is this fantastic book called The Brain That Changes Itself by a neurologist called Deutsch. He, from his experience in neurology, talks of some incredible stories of how the brain rewires. I'll give you another very simple example of rewiring, which happens. So I'm sure many of you, I mean, my grandmother used to tell me when I was young that people who are blind can hear better. And it used to be, I didn't know if it was true or not. And then I found some research which showed it is actually true that people who are blind generally tend to have, people who are born blind generally tend to have a wider peripheral audition than most of us do. And then later I found from neuroscience journals why that seems to be happening. So this is fascinating because there is a part in the occipital lobe somewhere here, which is dedicated to vision and interpreting the images that come from the retina. It unscrambles it and gives it an interpretation, and then we end up seeing what we see. And it's quite a bit of real estate in this part of the brain, which is dedicated to vision. So when you are born blind, those signals don't come to this part of the brain, and constantly. And after a while, the brain reassigns this real estate, which is meant in most people for vision, to the next nearest sensory interpretation area, which happens to be the auditory areas in the temporal lobes. So it is almost like hey, if this parking lot is empty, I'm going to use it to extend my parking mall in the neighboring place. And because of that, the auditory areas for congenitally blind people end up being more real estate than you and me. And therefore, they tend to hear better. Okay, so the brain is constantly doing it. Addiction goes the other way, unfortunately. Every time you go pick up something to soothe yourself temporarily, it could be nicotine, it could be something else, you are strengthening the link again and again. And for those of you who are intrigued or want to understand how meditation-based therapies are used for addiction rehabilitation, there is a fantastic book by Judson Brewer, who's a world-leading psychiatrist in in addiction rehabilitation. And meditation-based therapies today are one of the most effective treatments for treating many kinds of addiction. I have a cousin sister who works in the National Institute of Health in the US. She leads the neuroscience section for the National Institute of Drug Abuse, based in Maryland. And she and her group, they are doing research. It's a very big funded project by the US government, looking at therapies like this to treat drug addiction, along with using certain medication, chemical intervention. So chemical intervention plus meditation-based therapy. And she was sharing with me some research evidence which says it seems to be one of the most promising ways of doing it. And this goes back fascinatingly to a very early insight in Theravada Buddhism called dependent origination, where you're taught in that tradition to very minutely observe how do you react every time there is a small stimuli subjected to you. And by learning to see how you choose your response, frame by frame, action by action, stimuli by stimuli, you get greater ability to prevent yourself from choosing the wrong responses. I mean, philosophically, it made sense. Now, neuroscience is saying it seems to actually be working for quite a few people. Okay, so that's a perspective I wanted to share. And I think the brain that changes itself and the Judson Brewer's book, I forgot the name of the book, unfortunately, on addiction. There is another book called Siddhartha's Brain, written by a neuroscientist. I forgot the name of the author in this case, on what happens to the brain again as it goes through contemplative practices. There is one more book called The Altered Traits, written by this Richardson I mentioned before, which talks of both the myths and the benefits of meditation. There are many myths of meditation too, which from a scientific point of view has not been validated. I am not a parapsychologist. I don't claim to be an authority, but for example, there is nothing in the scientific literature which validates or proves, for example, something like extrasensory perception is possible. Some people believe it's possible, right? And so Altered Traits is a good book. There is another book called Train Your Mind, Change Your Brain, which is a very scientifically oriented book, also talking of how the brain rewires itself. And then there are quite a few I might be missing out on. Essentially, the insight more and more that neuroscience is gathering is that our brain is actually a very flawed organ. It's not nearly as rational or logical as we imagine it to be. It can, however, be made malleable for the better. And one of the things CBRT does is it also uses the power of compassion both self-compassion and compassion to others evoked during meditation to change your ability to lead a happier life. Okay, I'll leave that. I hope the science isn't overwhelming. Please do tell me. I can get carried away because I get very passionate about the brain science behind meditation. Raj, oh yes, I think a nice segue actually why it's called compassion-based resilience. So the meditation we did in the beginning of the session is from the samatha meditation, which is mindfulness. And there are 3 stages of mindfulness. And then there is the tradition which called the insight meditation, which is from mindfulness. You start seeing the true contents of your mind or try to understand how we are choosing responses, which is called insight meditation. I think the most popular one in that tradition that people are aware of is Vipassana. So Samatha and Vipassana both evolved as very important traditions in the early Indian Buddhist tradition. And there was another set of practices which became which we know existed in the Nalanda University. The Tibetans took it. This was also practiced quite a bit in Thailand and Myanmar. It's called metta. So in that meditation, you're not focusing so much on the breath, you're not focusing so much on any object, you're not focusing so much on your mindfulness or trying to regulate your attention as much as turning the attention in a compassionate way, firstly to yourself. It's like inculcating compassion for who you are in spite of all your imperfections. So complete acceptance of who you are. So the whole meditation is structured in a way to increase that particular skill. And then metta then turns it to compassion to every being gradually by imagining someone in flesh and blood. Now, this typically comes, the compassion part comes in modules 4 and 5, because what we found through practice, and this is not by the Cornell or the Columbia University Hospital, CBRT, this was known even to the early practitioners in India, let's say at Nalanda and so on, that unless you get your attention stable through mindfulness practice and get your distractions manageable while you meditate, your brain is not ready in that sense to get into this compassion meditation. But the compassion part is at the heart of CBRT because it suddenly changes the goal of your orientation of your meditation to finding calmness or reducing your anxiety for yourself, and you switch on a concern for others and moving out of yourself into a broader social engagement. And that is why it is called compassion-based resilience training. It is believed, there is again a lot of research on compassion-based meditation. Paradoxically, by worrying less about ourselves and being concerned about well-being of another, by cultivating this reduction in one's own selfishness, one develops a certain level of security, a certain level of ability not to activate the stress response. Now, this makes intuitive sense because if you are not as worried about self protection or thinking about it all the time, but worrying about somebody else, you're unlikely to get triggered by dangers that threaten yourself because you're minimizing the importance of self in some sense by evoking compassion for others. And that is a principle which it works on. And at a brain level, it also is making physical changes is what neuroscience research is doing. So it's at the center of CBRT, and which is why we think CBRT, while it takes a little longer to study, it incorporates various meditation, and therefore it's probably a very holistic regimen for cultivating true lasting happiness. Or happiness can sometimes have a connotation which is a bit corny, so we say eradication of restlessness, this inherent perpetual unsatisfactoriness we feel in spite of everything we have. Roughly, I think that was what was called dukkha in Sanskrit. That's probably the most accurate term with no English equivalent here. Thank you. I think we have a couple of more questions. Okay.
We had a couple of hands raised,
yeah,
but I see that they are lowered now. I'm not sure. Biju, Deepa, I had seen your hands raised. So if you have any questions.
All good, no questions. Thanks.
Okay, then maybe, yes, Vijay.
Just one question. I mean, a skeptic to a skeptic. You mentioned about the amygdala getting shrunk and the frontal lobe increasing in size, and the left to right brain bridge thickening in master meditators. So this, how did they come to know of this? Is it scientifically? How did they?
Yeah, so you can actually see electrical activity in the brain live by hooking diodes to the scalp. So the way most of the neuroscience research happens is, so you have the meditator in the laboratory, let's say like the University of Michigan, then they hook up these, and then they have these scans which show both blood flow and electrical activity. fMRI, could be fMRI or MRI, either of them. And then you do statistical analysis. I'm happy to show some article for it's what they do then is look for sufficient sample size to say whether the research is valid or not. And then they submit it for acceptance in peer-reviewed neuroscience journals. And the peer review is important because unless it meets those exacting scientific standard, it won't get accepted. And that is how we come to know of these things. And these are very mainstream neuroscience and departments. And I'm talking of institutions like Harvard. Mindfulness meditation emerged in Massachusetts University Hospital. CBRT is Cornell, Columbia. Oxford University has a mindfulness center attached to the Department of Psychiatry. So it's like hardcore. Now, none of them, by the way, today are saying that this is a magic pill. It doesn't mean it will work in all cases. It doesn't mean that if you are depressed, you will be cured if you meditate. No. What it says is you have a chance to minimize the suffering you go through. There is a probability that if you are one of those people for whom these therapies work, and by the way, no therapy in my knowledge has relieved symptoms for more than 2/3 of the population. For reasons we don't know yet, there is a chance. Okay, so the truth is in between. So, there would be extreme claims being made sometimes by people who propagate meditation-based therapies. And then on the other hand, you have, once you have mental suffering, you're stuck with it, or the only way of finding relief if you have depression is through an antidepressant, is a view which one often hears. When I was living in the US, there are some people who prescribe to it. It's not true. The efficacy for some of us between a Prozac and an MBSR may be the same. And MBSR, which is a mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is a meditation-based therapy, has one big added benefit, which is you have no risk of relapse. When you are on Prozac, you have dependence on the drug. And the moment you reduce dosage or you pull out of it, you fall right back into the original condition. And so that's the kind of, so that's how we know in terms of methodology.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
We do have one question in the chat as well.
Yes. It's a great question, Shabari. So there is a difference between empathetic compassion, and anyone who has trained to be a clinical psychologist or a counselor knows this. There is a line which divides helping someone empathetically, but without our own emotional state mirroring how they feel. So let's say you're counseling someone who is undergoing depression. Empathy requires you to feel it, completely understand it from the other person's perspective. And compassion calls for that same attitude, which has a very big element of empathy, without your feeling tone being like the other person. So it's, some people crudely say there's a difference between sympathy and empathy, for example. So when you cultivate compassion, and this is perhaps best, it's difficult for me to verbalize it. I think when one does that meditation, it becomes a little more apparent. It's a very calm, gentle, happy giving, that compassion. So I see someone suffering, but I'm not agitated. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling that, a little bit low. But what I'm giving is my strength. What I'm able to give is my attention, and what I'm giving to the other person is a lot of my own goodwill and my own thoughts, in a sense. And which is also the other reason why we say, unless you have reached a certain level of proficiency in mindfulness and haven't trained to manage your distraction, you should not embark too quickly into the compassion-based meditation. Because if you are in turmoil yourself, you are not going to be in a position to evoke compassion constructively without draining yourself. So compassion-based meditation, that shift from the mindfulness, strengthening of attention, understanding the content of my mind, understand how I choose my own response to stimuli, which is all stages of mindfulness. Only after that becomes robust does CBRT allow you to shift into compassion. And even when you graduate into the 4th and 5th module, you're always coming back and working on your mindfulness. You're not letting it go. You're not assuming that, once you arrived, you've arrived. Because if meditation teaches you one thing, it is the whole concept of anitya, or impermanence. Our mind is in flux. It goes for the better or for the worse, and we need to cultivate it. So hopefully that clarifies the question. Yeah.
Devika's hand is.
Yes, Devika.
Thanks for asking that question, Shabri, and for your response, Ajay. Because what it triggered for me and what it clarifies for me is a little more of the connection to the NVC concept, where you're looking at self-awareness to the extent of understanding and um, and accepting your own needs and feelings and things, right? And that acceptance, I think, enables you to step back from the emotion of it, and be able to manage it a little better. And because I liked what you said about having to keep coming back to it, because I'm finding that with my journey in NVC that it's like one step forward and like three steps back. Most of the time, it's a long journey. But what it has enabled me to do over the years is to be okay with a lot of the things within me that I was not okay with before. And the process of that being okay is allowing me to look at other people who either are distressed or who distress me in a way that I'm able to, with some compassion, like you're saying. Just the whole outlook has changed.
It's brilliantly summarized, Devika. I think you've drawn a lot of insight, I think, from your reflection, and even within CBRT. So module 4 is self-compassion, and module 5 is other compassion, compassion to others. And what we see is the acceptance of who you are, understanding why you chose to act or respond in a certain way to stimuli, and not being too emotionally attached to that response or without too much of critical outlook, seems to be a precondition to develop this acceptance and compassion for others. Or in other words, without self-compassion, you probably would struggle to express compassion to others without draining yourself. Yeah. And the one of the other very interesting things I learned myself with compassion is it's in many ways you when you go through that compassion meditation, you will realize that a whole lot of the aversion you feel for somebody, you can trace it back. Its origins lie in yourself being threatened in some way, almost always. So there's also self-protection always at the inherent in the, and then when you realize it, it makes that aversion appear to be a response for survival, and that changes the perspective. The aversion doesn't seem like a self-evident truth anymore, but it and all of this is better experience from meditation. So I will not be able to do justice when I describe it. Okay. Any other comments, or do you want me to go into a closing meditation? Maybe we go to a closing meditation.
I have one question. Sorry, this is.
Yes, please.
This is Madhapa. I mean, I have KAM against my name. I want to ask you one question. What is the difference between meditation and relaxation?
Great question. So let me answer it from a brain perspective. So there is relaxation as a component in meditation. So right now, when I'm talking to you, if you were to put me in an fMRI scan, most parts of my cortex will be emitting beta waves. which is a frequency of between 14 to 28 or 14 to 34. It differs from individual to individual. And that is how we operate most of our wakeful time when we are multitasking or going about our lives or doing our everyday chores, etc. When we relax, as most of you would have been in the first samatha meditation, which I guided you through, this beta wave in parts of the brain, especially in the cortex, will tend to drop and become alpha wave, which is usually between 18 to 14 hertz. And from that, some of you would have moved into deeper relaxation, which is a slower theta waves. That is exactly what you experience during hypnagogic sleep. You're lying on your bed, you know you're going to sleep soon, you know you're slipping into sleep, but you are aware of it and you're awake. And that is that period which is called hypnagogic sleep, when you typically have slow theta wave. From there, so that is the relaxation part of it. And in case of meditation, this entire process of moving to beta to alpha to deep relaxation happens. But there is another paradoxical process happening at the same time, which is while you're relaxing, you are becoming incredibly alert and paying attention to that one thing, which in the case of the meditation we did is a breath. And your brain in some other meditation is figuring out how it is choosing response to stimuli. So meditation is relaxation which is going down into sleep but stops before it turns into somnolence, and the slow theta wave, instead of going into delta, becomes high frequency theta wave for some reason, and you're kind of suspended on the path to sleep, but you're stopped from sleeping. You're just one step away and you're there. And while that is happening, you have this very paradoxical ultra attentiveness, which is a property or attribute of wakefulness. I am listening to the breath, I am watching the breath. And that combination or welding together is what we believe gives brain its restorative property during meditation. So one way of saying it is, when you're meditating, your brain shows electrical activity in areas and it shows a range of brainwave frequency, which are frequency of sleep and frequency of wakefulness put together. So in that sense, I would finally summarize it's relaxation plus attention regulation for samatha meditation. So hopefully that answers your question.
Partly, yes. The reason why I asked this question is because I tend to relax more when I'm active and focused on something that I enjoy doing. You know,
Yeah.
it could be, largely outdoors or whatever, whatever you kind of enjoy doing. And when you enjoy doing something, you tend to kind of automatically relax. And
Yes.
meditation comes very, it's very hard in the sense because my mind is multitasking at any level of meditation. It's never stationary, it's never zoned in. And therefore, I find relaxation or, I find myself at ease when I'm doing something I thoroughly enjoy.
I understand. Yes. So what you are talking of actually is a kind of meditation. And why I say that is there is a concept of a flow state in psychology. Flow as a concept, it was made very popular by a Czech psychologist called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So flow and the meditation we did, it has one common property. So you're so immersed. Let's say you're going outdoor, I don't know. So this happens with mountain climbers. This happens with poets, by the way. When you're writing a poem, you've lost all awareness and sense of anything else other than what you're doing. You're so immersed in it, and your attention is completely on one thing. When we did the samatha meditation, it was a breath. If you are a mountain climber, it's the mountain. If you are a poet, it's the word, which is why Zazen, which is a Japanese kind of meditation, actually is about writing poems. So there's a whole concept of mindful poetry, which sometimes I teach. So it's not a contradiction in term. Meditation, the word itself, if we interpret it in its true, goes back to its root, which is sati, which is awareness. It can be any object. It can be a lamp, it can be a breath, it can be a sound, which is what happens with mantra. It can be a series of words. It can be an image like a painter does, or it can be anything else. So it's likely to be a flow state which you are experiencing. And if it works for you, that's perfectly okay for the mindfulness part of meditation. Where, of course, you won't be able to do it through any other mean, perhaps, is when you graduate from mindfulness into compassion or the imagery visualization or the breathwork related meditation. That probably can't be substituted with any other activity, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Terrific. I'm going to, we may probably overshoot by 5 minutes if that's okay for everybody. All right, fantastic. Let me walk you through one more meditation, and with that we close. And I just, the purpose of this, the satisfaction I get is just introducing you to a method which is open to anybody, like doing yoga or going to the gym, which seems to offer one way in which each of us can rewire our brain for the better, and something which is evidence based. And with those final thoughts, let's move into another meditation, which uses a little bit of the first meditation but builds on it a little more. And I hope you enjoy this experience. So, as always, just sit comfortably wherever you are, your palms out on your knee, eyes closed. Take a couple of deep breaths, clear your lungs, sit comfortably, your shoulder down, focus on your breath as it comes into your body through your nostril, as it goes down through your chest, into your stomach, and watch it as it rises from your stomach and moves up through your body. Imagine your breath is like a train or a car. Just ride on it. And every time you get a distraction, don't worry about it. Just try to leave it aside, ignore it without fighting it, and go back to your breath. Stay with your breath. Notice how your body is slowing down as you become one with your breath. You're becoming gentle, feeling more at peace, sensing that all the tension in your body is slowly melting away. You are one living, breathing body bubble. Enjoy being with your breath and being within your body, feeling calm, feeling secure, feeling grounded, and thus feeling centered, thus feeling mildly energized. Turn your attention to what is within your body. Like a curious child going into a warm, dark cave, curious to find out what is inside the cave. Shine the torchlight of your attention within your body and within your mind. As the torchlight of your attention shines inside the dark cave of your body, you may notice a sensation or a feeling here. Just observe that sensation of comfort or discomfort. It could be pleasant or neutral or painful. Just observe it like watching a flowing river, and you will notice that sensation comes and then it goes. Don't pull that sensation towards you. Don't fight or push it away. Just watch it like watching a flowing river. And after that sensation disappears, turn the torchlight into another part of your cave, and you may stumble on another sensation. Just notice that sensation. Could be an image, a color, a feeling, a sensation in your body, whatever it may be. Don't cling on to it. Don't avoid it. Just watch it like watching a flowing river. And then when that sensation disappears, move on to something else, turning the flashlight of your attention to another part of your body. And thus keep moving from one sensation, watching it as it appears and letting it go as it disappears. And then move on to the next sensation. A sensation here and a sensation there. Watch it come and watch it go. A sensation here, another sensation there, coming and going like a firefly in a dark cave, appearing like a ripple and vanishing like a ripple. A sensation here and a sensation there, coming and going. And as you watch each sensation, each feeling that comes and goes inside you, you are accepting each of those sensations clearly, fully, without pulling it towards you or pushing it away. A sensation here and a sensation there. And thus being comfortable with each sensation and with the flow of breath inside your body, you're feeling calmer, stronger, freer, and lighter. And as you feel the lightness of your breath and the lightness of your self-acceptance, you now feel that you're slowly floating up from the ground, moving up towards your ceiling, passing through the roof. And now we are seeing the house, the building you are in, and you're floating up again. And now you see the roads, the trees, as if you're moving up in a hot air balloon. You're moving up again, and now you see the entire city. And now you're feeling a bit of coolness on your skin. It's the moisture of clouds. You're among clouds. There are rain clouds and white clouds around you. And they float by. And when you watch each cloud, you see they come and go like the sensations within your body. They come and go like your distraction. Each cloud is like a thought. You can't cling on to a cloud, so let go of it. Each cloud is like a feeling that appears and disappears and is carried away to be replaced by some other cloud. And as you watch all these clouds of distraction, thoughts, feelings, pains, pleasures, memories, anxieties, you notice that within your mind there is a much larger blue sky, which is vast and strong and reassuring and still. Go into that blue sky between the distracting clouds, between the thoughts, between the feeling. Find the blue sky of your mind. Enjoy the clarity, the mild blue brightness, the freshness of the blue sky. Rotate 360-degree and watch the blue sky all around you. And the clouds look very small within the blue sky. The clouds feel trivial as your own distractions. Enjoy the blueness of the sky. This is the core of your consciousness, your true mind. Stay in the blue sky of your consciousness, the most still, deepest part of your consciousness. Now that you have stayed in it, now that you know you have access to this wonderful part of your being, feeling larger than yourself, above all distractions, beyond them, beyond your thoughts, beyond your feelings. With that awareness and that stillness and that courage and wisdom and strength, you are now ready to slowly come back from the blue sky, down, come down slowly. Now you can see the city. Come down more. You can see you're just above the trees. Come back into the home you are sitting in. Come back fully into your body. Thus feeling grounded and peaceful, and having tasted the true blue sky of your mind, feeling refreshed, feeling rejuvenated, you're now comfortable to come back into the real world. Feel the temperature outside your skin, hear the sounds and the sensations in the world outside your body. Whenever you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes and come back into the real world. You can open your eyes and come back into the real world. Welcome back, and welcome back into the real world. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with this experience. We won't process it now. This begins to touch on the second and third module of CBRT. I just want to leave two thoughts, which is when you do a contemplative practice like meditation or mindful art or anything else which is truly absorbing all your senses, completely immersing your attention on that one thing. Even knowing you're distracted or catching your distraction is progress, because you're building your attention. So I would encourage you to be, if you embark on this journey and try to meditate, to be very gentle with yourself, not expect linear progress, not expect every time things will go the way you expect or go in a steady upward climb. Our human beings and our brains and biological entities are more complex. So it goes like that. But as long as over a period of time you're moving up, you're doing fine. But idea is to truly enjoy it. Second is, would be very happy to hear, as you do this, if you have questions, if you have any experiences to share, I would be very happy to hear that. And I'm sure, maybe at some stage later on, if there is any enough interest to take it further, I would, of course, be very happy to provide my time. This energizes me after 5.5 days of an hectic corporate job. I look forward to sessions like this in the weekend. I get a lot of joy in sharing a method which has worked for me and worked for many other people. And it's my hope this also increases the potential for each of you to pursue a path which is less anxious, less restless, and on the path of happiness. So once again, thank you so much for indulging me and for your engagement and for your attention. And wish all of you and your loved ones health and stay well and safe and healthy. And I hope to that our paths will cross again someday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you, Ajay, for the wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you
And
so
Thank
much.
you. Stay safe, everyone.
be
Thanks
safe.
a
Thank you
lot.
so
Bye.
much.
Bye, everyone. Stay
Bye.
safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.